This podcast was made with Anchor. Anchor is the easiest way to create and publish your podcast. It's free. Creation tools with it allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Helps you distribute your podcast. It's super simple to publish to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, any of the major ones. You can make money from your podcast. There's no minimum listenership, so they make it super easy to monetize. It's really everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So why don't you go out and download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm and get started.
All right, welcome. My name is Jason Gibson, and this is a podcast, ServiceSharp. I've got a couple of people on the line with me here. Randy Haas, which is always, for the most part, on here. And I also have Brent Peters and Justin Classville. Brent, Justin, introduce yourselves a little bit.
I'm Brent Peters. I am a solution architect for ServiceNow, and I have roughly 14 years of experience in the ITSM tools.
Hey, my name is Justin Classville. I've been working in ServiceNow since Eureka, and I'm a service management engineer is the title. I'm mostly development, heavy in the JavaScript side of things and the service portal.
So, Justin is my code guy that I go to anytime that I'm having a problem with some sort of code, whether it's JavaScript or pretty much anything. And when I don't know what to do and find myself in a deep, dark hole of ServiceNow, I contact Brent to help me see the light of what can be done there. And everybody knows Randy. Randy is leadership coach, guru about everything, master of all. So I really appreciate you guys being here. Today we're going to be talking about incident and request. We're going to be talking about what is an incident and what is a request. We seem to have a lot of confusion around that kind of very simple thing. And we're going to go over a few best practices, both on incident and request. So let's get started. So what is the difference between an incident and a request? Brent, from your experience on the ServiceNow side, do people get that confused?
Yeah, people seem to get that confused a lot. They don't understand the fact that incident management is really for your break fix kind of things. This was working yesterday, now it's not working, that kind of stuff. Where request management is where you're requesting a new keyboard, or you're requesting new services or new equipment. So it does confuse a lot of people.
So what do you think the confusion is? Why is this disconnect between something that's broken on the incident side and I'm requesting a service offering, or I need something on the request side?
Some of it is the people's mindset. They always think, that it's something's always broken, and that's why they're always doing it. Or some people just even have the mentality of, if I put it in as an incident, people see those as they need to get done quicker, so they get response quicker on those. But a lot of people do have the problem of not understanding if this really is broken or not. Like a user might think, hey, I can't assign this project task to someone, so it must be broken, when it really is they need to request for that person to have permissions in resource management or something like that. So they don't totally understand that it's really not broken, it's just you need to request permission or something.
Right. I also find that people are they really want everything to be incidents, and so they start out with the ServiceNow platform, and they do incident first, and then they get trapped in this everything's an incident because everything was an incident, and they haven't, and then they launch the catalog separate, after the fact, and things aren't migrated over. They're still, oh well, we still don't know this or that. Do you find that after an implementation of incident that people have that issue because they don't have the catalog yet, right? They haven't implemented that. Do you find that is a big part of that kind of mentality long term, and people just can't get it out of their head?
Yes, I have seen that, and usually I would suggest, it doesn't take much more to do request catalog at the same time you're doing incident management. That way you start out fresh out of the gate with the two separate kind of requests or ticketing, so that you do have your break fix and you do have your request. I've also seen where people do incident and don't want to do the request, so they just do everything. Either if they're requesting something, they do them as changes, and that's not right either.
No.
It's just, best practice would that you just deploy them as separate,
Right.
as separate processes, and do it that way. That way you're not muddling up your incident management with things that aren't really incidents that have SLAs tied to them, and you got to get this stuff done within a certain time period and all. But if it's a request, you don't have to. Well, it's not good to muddle that all up together. You might as well deploy them correctly the first time. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that it is interesting that it is not that it is best practice to implement those two together because they do complement each other so well. Now, change management and things like that, those can be implemented second and third, but really incident and request, they just go hand in hand, and it keeps things clear. So that's what we have. We have incident, break fix, something's broken. You have requests. I want something. I need something. Now, I find that one of the benefits to launching requests, at least as fleshed out as possible with as many requests as possible, is that there's less confusion and you can flow workflows back and forth. Now, Justin, do you think it's extremely important to have when you launch the catalog to have it, fleshed out with, say, 10, 20, 30? How many forms do you really need to start with?
Well, I really just think it completely depends on the company. You know what I mean? There's really no one size fits all type of thing when it comes to the catalog. If you try to throw like processes in there instead of just requesting an item, like more of a shopping cart type thing, you could have a whole lot in there. I personally follow a different route on that. I like to separate those out. You can still have a record producer in your catalog, of course, which can be acting the same way, but I don't think you should mix catalog items with processes, just like you shouldn't mix incidents with catalog items. But even then, you can have a little catalog item to fill out a very basic incident if you want. I think there's actually one by default, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, there is. Yeah. And I'm wondering your opinion, all of you guys, what is your opinion on a general request when you launch the portal?
Well, I'm actually kind of if you first launch it and you have the staff to be able to maintain it, I think maybe the first week or two, it's maybe even longer, I guess, depending on how many users you have. Having a general type thing that then you can coach the user on what they should have used, or maybe now that you need to make another request that you hadn't thought of. I think it's useful at the beginning. I don't think you should have one at all times because it becomes a catch-all. It's like, it's the first thing I'm going to fill out because I know that the help desk will see it and then transfer it where it needs to go or whatever. And I don't think it's a great thing to have forever, but a general request for very, very early release, or if you're adding a whole big group, like a whole nother department's coming on and using ServiceNow, you might enable it for just that department. But I don't think you should have one at all times. I do think it's very useful to gather, that information that you can help learn, your coaching that you would coach your users on.
Okay. So initially, at first, while we're still establishing the catalog, we're still building request items, we're still building all those things, keep that general request. But when you get it built out, you're saying that's when you maybe consider turning that one off, or at least monitoring it and pushing people to the right direction, right?
Yeah, I think you should, start out and make sure you've captured what people are actually trying to use it for. You're going to start getting incidents that are requests, that sort of thing, and which is kind of another catch-all there as well. But I think it has a use. I'm not a huge believer in leaving it there at all times, because either the person may not search the catalog well enough, which is just going to add more cost to your help desk or whoever you have monitoring the queues.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think it's very useful at the beginning, but I'm not a huge fan otherwise. I'd rather just create, if a team needs something or if we get enough requests for one particular thing, I think it's better to make, even if it's a tiny little, very specific thing. I'm having a hard time thinking of one. But
server request or, virtual server request or something to that effect.
Well, those for sure, yeah. Definitely want to do that. But even, little things like I need a new chair or reserve a office space, or I don't know, just little things. I wish I had a better idea in my head of what one would be, but
sure.
It's still useful to create a very specific catalog item, because it's not like it takes a long time if you have a 5-field catalog item. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and I think it's important for long-term reporting, right? It's difficult to do a report that says, yes, I have these 400 forms, and it's very specific. Now I have one form with 400 items, and it's all general requests. What do I do with that, right? It just doesn't. It doesn't make reporting what's being done very well. It just is, we have 400 general requests go through. Well, what does that actually mean? We don't even know. Were they server requests? Were they, requesting a mouse? What were they? And so it makes that difficult. So I get where you would want to disable that eventually. And I'm going to ask another dreaded question. Emails to create incidents, yes or no? Nobody?
I'm trying to form my sentence, but I don't care for them. Personally, I don't care for emails creating. For one thing, you don't get all the information you need from those emails. I'd rather direct the users to the self-service portal and say, go fill out the form, and kind of direct them, because that also kind of directs them to self-service so they can do knowledge searches and see what could fix their own issue instead of having to open a ticket. That way you kind of direct them that way. And also the email, it is possible. I've used it before. It's great. It works fine, but it just doesn't get the information that most technicians are going to need from the customer. So,
yeah, I think that the key there is that really, when you're designing all of this, you want to direct the user as much as possible, because they're going to take the path of least resistance. And so the path of least resistance is stuff's broke, fix it. And that just wastes the service desk time as they're trying to triage tickets and things like that. So the best approach is to spend the time to really thoughtfully think about, how do we drive the user to quickly give us the details that we need. And so you've got the two sides of it that you've got to balance. You've got to make it to where it's easy for the user so that they don't sit back and say, well, I'm not putting a ticket in at all. I'm just going to complain to my boss. but you've also got to make it to where there's enough of a process around it to where you do actually get some useful information, and you can take advantage of some of the automation features and some of the power of, like he said, bring up a knowledge base article. Hey, have you thought about rebooting? Do you know how to type your password in, kind of things. So it's just kind of a balancing act, I think, there.
I pretty much agree with you. I do think you should have it for replying, of course, but for creating, I'm not a fan. I'd rather you coach the user on which ticket they should have filled out. Life is about learning, right? So you might as well make the team work correctly and point them to the right thing to get the action. It'll be quicker in the end for them as well if they do it that way. Because creating a ticket that doesn't have any info, help desk has to call them back, or whoever, someone has to call them back and try to get the basics of the information needed, and then pass that to the people who would be working it. And in the end, it's just taking longer for you to get what you need. Where if you just fill out the correct form, it'd be done. Go to the right people the first time with the right info, or at least supposedly the right info if you filled it out right.
What I've found is it becomes a crutch. Just
need something else, but they're going to use it anyway, right?
Right.
Partially,
Sorry about that. No, what I was trying to say is they use it as a crutch as well, right?
Yeah. I think that if you absolutely want to have a fire and forget method, like you for whatever reason you can't see your users not firing an email, then set it as a way to educate the user. So, for instance, an email to the help desk does not trigger a ticket to be created, but it does go into a queue where someone on the help desk calls the user and then walks them through creating an incident and takes the time to say, click here, this is knowledge, click here, this is this. This is the fastest way to get the response. And then you have to hold to it, basically say that it doesn't matter who you are. If you email it, it's going to be a callback, and we're going to walk you through this process to get you in the queue, but you're not actually in the queue and have a priority until we get a hold of you and do that process. I think that's fine to do it that way as a chance to educate users, but eventually you want to cut that off and not let them shoot emails over.
Yeah. So coming up in some of the newer releases is going to be a integration with Microsoft Outlook. Have you guys looked at that any? Do you think that might be potentially a huge time saver for people to be able to create incidents from Outlook?
You can already do that with making your own Outlook plugin, which is not a complex thing. But if they're releasing their own, then it's handy to have, especially with at least the places I have been. They usually have like a phishing alert that you can put up there, or some sort of notify security or whatnot. So people are kind of used to, or at least some would be used to finding buttons up there anyway to maybe use. I don't necessarily think. Now, granted, I'm IT side of things, so from my side, I don't believe I would ever even realize it's there. Even if you told me about it, I'd probably forget, because it's not. I don't think going to my email is how I would access a help desk thing. Most places, many places nowadays have a landing page or some sort of app page where you go to and you can click on a website or load an app, that sort of thing from it. So
right.
I'm not entirely certain that it's overly useful, but for the few people that would, or maybe it's a larger percent of your standard end user, and me just being in IT for so long, to me it just doesn't make sense that I'd go to that to then go somewhere else.
Right.
But why use that when you can write an entire app to submit tickets through? You know what I'm saying? Has anybody ever seen somebody do that? Write an entire app just to submit tickets instead of going into ServiceNow?
Yes. I don't know. That might have happened somewhere, and maybe we could have created it in like 5 minutes a different way
and be more effective on it. Yes. But I could see maybe using email if you're like a just implementing ServiceNow, and you have the email template and a button on Outlook. But if you're like in the system and you've had it for a while and you have your customers already using the self-service portal, I would just continue to keep that updated and do it that way too.
I think probably for me, the only benefit would be real end users, like last line end users, not ITIL, not people that work in the system every day, but real end users that want to submit something, and they can click a button and then it bring up the actual form, and they fill the form out and it creates it in ServiceNow. I see that as being a benefit. It's not like a normal email where you would send it and it would be blank. It would have all the same information as the form itself. Now that seems beneficial to me. What would be beneficial to ITIL, in my opinion, what I'm looking forward to is the idea that you'll be able to also create a personal task from that same button. So you'll click it and create a P task, and it'll create it that email as a P task. So I think that will be beneficial to keeping organized. But that's what I'm looking forward to for sure.
Okay. Now, one place I have used email very successfully to open up tickets is just a quick and simple event management from another system. There's a network error, and the event system emails that to the technicians. They can also email to ServiceNow, open a ticket and assign it to that group, so they have a ticket now that they can work on and all that kind of stuff. So using it on the event management part, where it's always going to be the same type of email, same format every time, I can see using it that. But using email for the customer to just plain text and put whatever they want, I haven't seen that work very successfely.
Yeah, and I will say on that note, we've done things like proof point alerts, right? Where they've got the proof point alerts, and we create tickets for the security team and do an inbound action. I think that is a fantastic way to automate things quite a bit. The problem with some of those things with events is not if every event is really an incident. And so defining those things is a little more difficult at times. But that's also why you have event management and things to that effect for some of those as well. And security operations has a whole bunch of other functionalities, but those will be for another podcast. But yeah, that's fantastic. So I'm new, never been in ServiceNow. How much should I customize incident?
Day one, none.
Okay. All right. Good.
I would agree with that. Incident management in ServiceNow pretty much aligns with ITIL's incident management. So most of the fields that are on there are going to be the ones that you are going to want to use company-wide to get your prioritization, your what's actually wrong, who needs to be contacted, what assignment group, that kind of stuff is already there by default. So for the most part, there's no reason to add any customized fields when you first start out.
Okay. I definitely think you should, give it a trial run of sorts, if you will. Because when you're thinking of what, every little fringe case that you want to be able to cover, even if you don't necessarily think it's a fringe case, but if something happens 5 times every 6 months, it's probably not worth having a field for it.
Yeah.
It may very well be if you need some sort of auditing report or what. I mean, I'm sure there's a scenario it is valuable, but overall, I would definitely give a good try with what's there by default. Spend time filling out the categories, subcategories. Make sure you have your departments and your assignment groups and all that. That should be your main effort, I would say, to go live with incident. And just try it out. See, over time, you'll be able to tell what was missed. The workers themselves will be able to say, boy, it would have been nice if I could have, had this sub. It's probably just categories and subcategories would be my guess, so that you could assign things differently. But
right.
Actual field-wise, I don't think I'd play with very much at the start, because you might just be ending up adding fields that have such limited use they really aren't valuable.
Yes, I would agree with that.
So start out as basic as possible, as close to out of the box as possible, and then just kind of do continual improvement. Is that what really that is probably the best practice on that?
A continual improvement is something you should always do with a process, and that's with every process. So yeah, you should always go back if you're first starting out, you could do it 2 months later, then you can do it like 4 months later, every 6 months. Most time, whenever you get something settled and working, you would do a 12-month continual improvements audit on it and make sure that everything's working, that you are getting the info you need, and everything from there.
Okay, all right, man. So we've got a lot of content here, and we could probably go on forever talking about the intricacies of incident or request and things to that effect. I think that one of the great things about it is everybody does it a little differently, and there's a lot of opinions on incident and request and what should be in there and things to that effect. But I think we covered some great best practices. Every organization is different, but like Brent and Justin, we always encourage keep it as out of the box as possible, and make sure that you have good, solid business justifications for any kind of configuration and customization, especially customizations. But make sure that business need is there.
I'd like to point out one quick thing as well. If you are moving from another tool to ServiceNow, take that opportunity to actually look at your process, and maybe using ServiceNow's out of the box it'll be different, of course. Just so many people want to make all the fields and the general layout look exactly like the previous tool they had. There's a reason you're no longer on that tool. Maybe it's as simple as cost or something, but I think you should definitely try to give the process a chance that's inside ServiceNow before you just try to replicate your previous tool you were using.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's like bringing your bad habits, right?
I 110% agree with that.
Yeah. How many times have we seen that, though?
Yeah.
Pretty much every project that we've stepped into, that's been the mindset is make it look like what we're doing now. But
right.
They spend a significant amount of time and money building it to match ITIL. And there's a reason why it's continuing to become the most popular platform out there for this. So why reinvent the wheel?
It's a very unique way of working with tickets. To me, it's very logical. But then again, I've been in the tool for so long now, I don't really remember a whole lot of other tools. So, but yeah, definitely, give it a chance, and preaching to the choir here, I suppose, but definitely try to stay out of the box and just give it a chance with what's there already. Add fields later if you need them. Extend tables, that sort of thing. Try not to do too much on base tables. I'm sure that'll be another video later or podcast later down the road.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely.
Anything that we want to cover as far as best practices for requests?
Oh man. Make sure that you create a couple of things correctly. First is you have variable sets. Use them, but use them for very specific purpose. Things that are repeatable that you can put on multiple items. We've had customers that put every variable in the form in a variable set, and that's how they did every form. It is not for that. It is strictly for the few things that you have that are repeatable over and over and over. And remember, your customers are looking at this. So make sure you don't have these weird hanging variables out on the right-hand side or weird format on things. That gets that is what drives people away from of filling out a form, is when it looks weird, or it looks like 1980s, things like that. So if you're creating them, make sure and create them that have a nice look to them, and as well as functional.
And to go on that real quick, I came from web development before I came to ServiceNow, and that brought with me assumptions for, like things like DOM manipulation and things like that. Which, basically what I'm trying to say is, if you have a developer that you are converting from another tool to now be your ServiceNow developer, make them, highly suggest them, give them bonuses, all that, to go through the developer courses, because they will. That's the only way you're going to get their eyes open to some of the unique methods that are available to them with the ServiceNow API. There's so many things that it does for you that you will try to do on your own, and some things are blocked by ServiceNow because they're trying to maintain an integrity of the look and feel and everything. But anyway, use the developer site. It's free, and you don't even have to have an account of any type. You just have your Gmail or whatever your personal email is, sign up, take the courses, and learn some of the ins and outs of how the development is really done. Even if you're a wonderful JavaScript developer, you're not going to be able to do pure JavaScript, because there's some little tweaks here or there that you need to learn how to use.
Get element by ID. That comes to mind.
Yes, that is something that's common. You will not do any DOM manipulation at all. So learn what they give you. They have ways you can get that data that's actually easier once you learn how to use it. And easier to read, more readability, I believe. I don't know if that's the proper way to say that sentence, but we're going to use it.
Hey, that's right.
The other thing is, keep your forms as simple as possible. Gather the information you need, but keep them simple. Because if someone brings up a form that has 30 or 40 fields right there as soon as it comes up, they're going to be so overwhelmed they're not going to fill it out. But if you kind of drive them to those fields, like ask a question, and then if they answer it this way, these 3 fields come up and show up, that kind of stuff. You don't want to do that a whole lot, but you don't want to also put 30 or 40 fields on the form when you first start out. It frustrates and confuses the customers a lot of time.
Absolutely. Use those UI policies and UI and catalog actions. That's really important.
Also, when you're developing your forms, if you have the self-service portal, make sure that the form works in the portal and in ServiceNow, because they do display differently. The functions work differently on the portal than they do within ServiceNow. So you got to make sure that you have both functioning the same.
Well, in the JavaScript, right? Justin, you'd probably be the best on this. The JavaScript doesn't work all the way in the portal the same way it does in the base view, right?
Yeah, to do things like script includes, you have to call them through asynchronous methods. You're not allowed to. Basically, they're trying to make it so you can't force the page to take longer to load for most of the things. But you have an easy way to do that in a client script. There's a little drop down, tells you, I think it says UI type, and it's either desktop or mobile/service portal. So you can make one for each if you have something that is unique like that, where you need to use script includes, or I'm trying to think what else is in it. It's really just script includes, I believe, that's going to be the big difference.
When you do glide record queries, you have to do loopbacks now to make them work on the portal. They still work in the UI, but you have to have them on the portal. You have to do a loopback where you didn't used to before. So that's part of that DOM manipulation that they've taken away.
For those that don't understand what the loopback is, what is it that you're actually referring to in that?
So when you go ahead.
When you're doing a query, normally you would do, okay, I want to set my table, I want to add my query of look up this sysID, and you say query, then you say if there's a next thing, go on and do what I want you to do. In a loopback, you just do the query, and then you tell the query to call a function. Then you have to have a function on the same script that does the rest of the stuff. If there's something there, I want you to update this field with the information and so on. So,
right. Okay. Yeah, so there is, and it constantly changes. So ServiceNow is constantly evolving, constantly changing. I mean, the portal didn't exist, 5 versions ago. So as things move forward and we're using the portal for things and we're moving forward in the type of coding that they use, remember it's all rendered in Angular and Bootstrap on the portal, right?
Yes, it is. And just because you don't have, if you're not using the ESS service portal, that doesn't mean you're not using the service portal. If you have like time cards or you're using dashboard, some of the dashboards are workbenches. Those are all through the service portal stuff. So you kind of have to start learning and using that stuff because they're starting to use it more and more in ServiceNow.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, I think this was a great conversation. We will continue to have these conversations on a regular basis. So look for the next podcast in a week. Again, thank you for joining us, and we will look forward to seeing you next time.
Appreciate the invite.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.